I stared resolutely ahead, watching as my cup of mushroom soup revolved in the microwave. In the periphery of my vision, I could still see it, the thing dangling upside down from the ceiling. I could hear the wet, rattling sound from its throat, smell the sickening sweet scent it emanated. My face remained congealed in a grim expression as I determinedly ignored its presence. It lowered its pale, waxen face down to mine, blocking my view of the microwave. It stared straight into my eyes, and the hollow emptiness of its dark eyes, all irises and no whites, sent icy chills down my spine. Then it reached out one of its many limbs and placed a clammy, deformed hand on my neck. The pit of cold fear in my stomach deepened, though I refused to flinch. I knew that I should acknowledge it, accept its presence, and work around it. I knew that, much like what I had taught my clients. Avoiding and making yourself block out something that inevitably leads to the opposite effect. Your mind would just get more fixated on whatever it was you were trying to ignore, giving it power, a stronger hold over you. But I was tired. I couldn't do it. My mind was in shambles. The past few weeks had been a tedious and painful battle of wills. It terrorized and mocked me at every opportunity while I performed all manners of mental gymnastics, trying to focus on going about my day to not let it get to me. I was wiped out. I was done working on accepting its presence, its chilling, terrifying, annoying presence. I was done with focusing my mind on my activities despite its presence. I wanted to grab hold of it, shake it, stab it, choke it out. Jones had been helping to keep me in check, calming me down when I lost it, when the fear and anger took over, but I was stretched perilously thin. It had taken my passion from me. I couldn't do my job. I couldn't do the one thing I had spent over a decade working towards, the one thing that gave me fulfillment over the past few years. I couldn't be a psychologist with that thing around me. I had tried. I had gone for a scheduled session, sat there and plastered various expressions on my face. A look of concern, a look of understanding, a smile here, some nodding there, but I hadn't been able to get through the session. As my client sat opposite me, pouring her heart out, it had scuttled back and forth in an odd, crooked gait, looking at me with a sneer on its face. At least it no longer spoke to me. Ever since the one thing it uttered, it had kept an eerie silence. But it didn't need to talk to mess with my head. During that session, at times it had plastered itself on my client's face. At times it had perched behind me. As I had reached out to offer my client some tissues, it had climbed atop her head and slowly drawn one of its limbs across her neck, all the while contorting its lips in an unnerving smile, spittle playing on its lips. I had watched in repressed horror, expecting blood to spill out from her throat, but it hadn't. At another point, I had felt a strange urge, a piercing thought, kill her. I knew it had put it in my head. Jones had tried to intervene. He had stood unseen next to the client, guiding me. Let it do what it's doing. You don't have to fight to ignore it. You don't have to will it to stop, for it to disappear. Just let it be. Put your mind on listening to her. Focus on your client sharing her story. But it hadn't helped. All he had done was to further distract me, to add to the noise in my head. I hadn't been surprised when my client voiced her discomfort at my odd behavior. If I had been in the right frame of mind, I would probably have applauded her for it. She was deeply nervous and an insecure girl, and just 2 months ago, she wouldn't have dared to mention it. You seem really distracted, she had said. You keep looking about. I'm not sure at what. Are you okay? I had just stared at her, unspeaking for a few moments. Then I pulled myself together. I'm so sorry, but I am having a terrible headache and I took some medication. It's really messing with my concentration. Oh, I'm sorry. Would you? She had trailed off, uncertain, awkward. Let's end this session now. I'm so sorry to have made you come down. I should have known my limits, let you know that I wasn't up to it. I won't charge you for today. I'm terribly sorry. My client had been understanding, and for that I was grateful. The moment she left the clinic, I just broke down in tears. Jones had sat next to me, not saying a word. For that, I was grateful too. Perhaps I was losing my mind. Maybe that thing didn't exist. Maybe I needed some serious psychological help. Maybe it was just a hallucination. Maybe Jones really was just Dave's hallucination, and I'd start to hallucinate too. That was why I could also see Jones. Or maybe for all I knew, Dave wasn't even really there. Maybe even Dave had been my hallucination too. My hallucination who was hallucinating someone else? A strange chuckle escaped my lips. I was going crazy. I really was. Since that one disaster of a session, I hadn't had any other sessions. I had canceled all my appointments with the claim of ill health. For the past few weeks, I'd just been at home, alone, ignoring messages and calls from the outside world. It was just Jones and me and it. The microwave beeped, pulling me out of my thoughts. I ignored the thing, who just hung there, staring at me. It definitely wasn't fading. In fact, it seemed tougher, stronger. It was probably having a blast feeding on my dwindling life force. I grabbed the cup and immediately dropped it, cursing. I ran my raw, singed skin under tap water for a while as Jones sat on the countertop, watching as the water flowed. Then he spoke up. You know, its form. It chose it. It chose it knowing it was something you would fear. I was silent for a while, mustering the energy to snap out of the heavy sludge I felt encased in. I forced a response. It chose it? How do you know? Beings from my side, we can choose our forms. That was news to me. From the depths of my emotional sewage, a bubble of curiosity popped up. So you chose your form. Jones hesitated a moment. He seemed nervous. Yes, I did. He looked away. What made you choose this form? Was it someone you knew? Someone you met? He didn't respond. I wanted to probe, to ask more, but a foreboding sense told me that I wouldn't like the answer. And I couldn't deal with any more surprises at the moment. Jones was my one tether to sanity, and I wanted to keep it that way. Or maybe he was a product of my insanity. Who knew? I just sat in front of the TV and ate my soup. The show was almost over when Jones finally spoke up. I want to be honest with you, and I hope you'd reserve your judgment and keep in mind what I've done for you, for Dave, the experiences we've had. I just looked at it. This form, it was someone I had met before. The silence stretched out between us. I was once a simple thing too, a simple creature. Blind, not truly sentient. I knew I had to feed. That was my only instinct, to feed. He looked at the floor, speaking quickly, as if forcing the words out before he lost his nerve. I came across this guy then, except I didn't register him as a guy, a person. I just recognized him as a food source. I consumed his energy, his life force. I just kept. I took so much of it, I would usually move from food source to food source, as it was hard to keep being connected to someone on this side. The connections would usually come and go, but he was tuned into my world. He was somehow straddling both worlds, like Dave was. But I wasn't me, not then. I was that simple creature, so I stuck to him, and I kept feeding off of him. The blood slowly drained from my face. I wished I hadn't asked. Then I started to gain a higher form of consciousness. I started to have thoughts other than seeking food. I started to come to life. I think I was taking on the essence he had. I think I sucked so much of his life force that I developed, evolved, progressed, became an actual sentient being, and I began to think his thoughts at first, feel his emotions. Then I started to think my own thoughts. I became a person, if that's what I am. But by the time I realized what I was doing to him, gained the morality to know it was wrong, it was too late. I stopped feeding on him, but it was too late. I must have taken too much of his life force. One day, he just stopped breathing. He forced his head up and he looked at me, pain and shame in his eyes. It was my turn to look away. I felt so much guilt. I still feel so much guilt. So I took on his form to honor him, to keep him in memory, to remind myself of what I did. And I started trying to stop these other things, stop these creatures which I used to be. I've been trying to redeem myself since then. I was quiet, my face blank. "Say something," Jones pleaded after a long, uncomfortable silence. "Did you feed off Dave?" I asked in a tone more abrupt than I intended. "No, I didn't, not Dave." I noted his choice of words and dread seeped in. "Not Dave? Did you feed off me?" Jones paused for a long moment. "Yes, but only once or twice, that's it." I stared at him, fearful, furious, indignant, speechless. "But only to help Dave. I wanted some of your skills, and I didn't have the time to take years to learn them. I just needed a little bit of you to help Dave." But I stopped once I had enough to help him. Then I realized that you had that thing with you, and I wanted to help. My lips pressed together tightly. I gripped the cup and spoon hard. "Get out," I wanted to shout. "Get out and leave me alone." But I didn't say a word because I needed him. Despite everything, despite the fear that filled me, the horror and resentment of having him feed on me, I couldn't ask him to leave. I couldn't face that thing alone. That thing was skittering up my chest, a look of mocking glee on its face. So I sat there and took another mouthful of my soup. Joan sat across from me, staring anxiously as I finished the soup with deliberate sips. Then I looked him straight in the eye. "You want to help? Then help. Get rid of it." "I'm trying. It's a long process, but if we just..." No more of this mindfulness, focus on my damn mind bullshit. I have tried. I've been trying so damn hard, but it's obviously not working. It's not. I'm done trying. You want to help? Help. Do something. Do anything. Jones looked at me, eyes wide, sadness and helplessness etched on his face. I turned away and switched to another show. He was silent for a long while. I could tell he was deep in thought. Then he sat up, drawing my attention. His face hardened with determination. "I will do something about it. I'm going to help you." "How?" "I'm going to feed on it." Despite myself, my eyes widened in surprise. "You're going to what?" "I can feed on it. I haven't tried it before, but if we share the same food source..." He winced as he said the words. "If we both feed off people from your world, I can perhaps feed off it, like a big fish, small fish thing." Not to say you're the worm or anything. I didn't know what to say. I just stared at him. I don't know what it will be like, what will happen. I'd try it now, but I'd prefer if you don't see me do it, if you didn't watch. I looked at him, digesting his words. Then I nodded, I switched the television off, and walked towards my bedroom. The thing tried to follow me. I could hear its erratic footsteps. I didn't look back. I heard Jones grapple it. It screeched. I still didn't look back, just continued into my bedroom and shut the door. I went through the motions of getting ready for sleep, ignoring the haunting shrieks and the heavy thuds that went on outside. I don't know how I fell asleep, but I did. And when I awoke, the memories of the previous night sank in. I just lay in bed staring at the ceiling. I didn't know what to do. Then my door creaked open. To my immense relief, Jones walked in, and there was nothing following behind. "It's gone," he said simply. A faint sense of relief started to force its way through my guarded disbelief. I rubbed the sleep out of my eyes and took a better look at him. There was a hollowness to his eyes, a touch of unrecognizable emotion tinting his face. His skin seemed pale, waxen. "Are you all right?" I asked timidly. Whatever he did, it seemed to have taken a great toll on him. "I am," he said. Then he smiled, a forced contortion of his lips. My relief quickly dissolved into a cold, liquid fear. Dread tingled on my neck. Something was wrong. I felt petrified, but I shoved the fear deeper inside. "He's probably just strained," I thought desperately. "He just needs to rest to get back to his normal self." "Yes," he said, startling me. "I just need to rest. I'll be back to normal again." His smile widened. It was an unnerving but strangely familiar smile.